As you know, David Icke has just been banned. What's he been banned for? He's been banned for being a naughty little boy.
David Icke's YouTube channel has been deleted. He's been completely deplatformed from the second largest search engine in the world.
Because Brian Rose and David Icke, when you put those terrible twins together, they cause a lot of problems. And so the great tyrannical, technocratic behemoths of the world like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Spotify and YouTube need to keep them quiet like good parents should. And this is what's happened. Banning David Icke validates his ideas. If Icke is spreading misinformation, censoring him and silencing him legitimizes what he's saying, doesn't it? Like being locked in a small room with a very big man who's got an addiction to baked beans. You know it's only a matter of time that something comes down the pipeline. And in David Icke's case, he knew he was being banned. It was just a matter of time. If you don't know the story, David Icke and Brian Rose through London Real got together for a little interview, as little kids do. And then parents, YouTube, they didn't like this little relationship starting to happen. The first interview that they had, it scored a lot of people. It was so good, in fact, that Brian Rose decided that he wanted to do another interview with good old Icke. So they did Rose Icke interview number 2. So they live streamed it. As they were live streaming it, it had the second highest ranking, I think, that day. And YouTube didn't like it, so they banned it. Now, this got up a lot of people's backs, and those little kids were told not to meet again by their parents, because YouTube, being the parents, said to Brian Rose, look, Brian, if you meet that terrible, terrible young friend of yours called David Icke again, we're not going to give you any pocket money. Demonetized. So Brian, as he's growing up, you know, out of adolescence, got a little bit upset being told by his parents who and who he shouldn't speak to. So good old Brian decided to go and leave home and make his own platform so that he could have control, so that he could have freedom of speech, because he wasn't allowed to be who he wanted to be in the house of YouTube. The Rose Icke interview, now infamously known as the banned interview, it was so popular during its streaming, it ranked number 2 in the world. But then again, Satan is ranked number 2 after Jesus, isn't he? So obviously the video was evil, and quite rightly, it was banned, censored, and silenced. So Rose, not liking parental control by YouTube, decided to make another video, Rose and Icke 3. So Rose, not liking parental control from YouTube, decided to leave home and go and build his own home, which he called a platform. And on that platform, he's decided to live stream David Icke and Rose interview number 3. Now, this is where it all gets a little bit interesting. Now, we all know what happens when you start to challenge the gods and you develop a little bit of hubris here and there. We all know what happens when you fly too close to the sun, and we all know what happens when you start building towers up to the heavens. Someone always knocks them down. Now, the David Icke and Rose interview number 3 was supposed to be coming out tomorrow. But just as it was coming out, what happened? YouTube decided to ban David Icke, wipe all its videos. Just a couple of days after, Facebook decided to do the same. And you've got to start thinking, don't you? You've got to start thinking, is this cabal, all these huge technocratic sources of information connected some way or another? And you start to think, yeah, they are. And this becomes very dangerous. So like any good parent, YouTube said, look, Brian Rose, we don't like you mixing and talking with that little David Icke. If you do it again, we're going to ban your videos and we're going to demonetize you. We might even lock your channel down. Now, you might think that that is censorship of freedom of speech, but what you don't realize is we're a private company and we can do what the fuck we like. Granddaddy Icke, who's starting to look like a much younger version of Gandalf, both with their lovely silver hair, probably because they visit the same hairdresser, is starting to become a bit of a headache for these technocratic companies which are trying to control the modern narrative with information. They like to censor some people but not other people. Therefore, they start to influence the information that we get. Information creates behavioural changes. So they're starting to make behavioural changes and social engineering in society. If a crazy lunatic man is spreading misinformation, then why should it matter? It only matters when someone is starting to tell the truth. And when these companies start to close down people, people start to think maybe actually they are speaking the truth. What these companies seem to forget is that at school people study the Second World War, and what everyone notices is that when you have a tyrannical dictator, they start closing down and punishing people for speaking out against them, especially when those people are speaking the truth, i.e. Hitler, Jews and other things like that. You're making a martyr out of Icke, Joseph Watson, Alex Jones, Yiannopoulos.
They didn't just ban me, they just defamed us.
This is punishment, this is a political purge, this has nothing to do with hate.
We the people, we're a bit stupid, you see, because none of us went to school, and the schools that we did go to, they never taught us particularly well, did they? Because the education system's so bad. We lack things like critical analysis. We lack things like being able to decipher or to understand or to interpret bits of information. And that's why we need these big, monolithic, huge companies to think for us, because we don't have that capacity and our feelings get hurt so fast and so quick. We need to be defended and we need to be kept safe, and we the people are very happy to give up our freedom to be kept safe, because what is important for us is to sit in front of the Netflix channel and hop the channels, because that is our interpretation of freedom. We the people, we don't need to help the future generations. We don't need to help the children, because we sitting, listening, doing what the government says and listening to the modern narrative, which is deciphered and predicted and determined for us by huge private companies, is what we need for the future.